Welcome to Heart Speak Podcast, episode 294, The Earth, Lights, Camera, Action. Well, hello there, wherever you are in the world. It's good to be back with you, and thank you for joining me at an extraordinary time in our history, where so much is happening that's affecting us individually, amongst our family, as a species, and as members of this planet. And solar system and galaxy, if we want to include those. You may have had an interesting weekend, last weekend, when 7 solar storms hit this planet. And because of our weakened magnetic field, many of you may have seen the auroras, what we call the northern or southern lights, in latitudes that are much lower than they usually appear. Usually they stay around the poles. And because you saw them and because of our weakened magnetic field, you may have seen not just the green color, which is more common, but you may have seen reds and blues and yellows due to the higher frequency of electrons and photons being released. So this is really quite an outstanding statement that I want to look into in this podcast, but I want to tie it also in with other events, the astrology, such as where you may remember we had the conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus, the earth, the body, nature, that happened on the 20th of April. And now the sun is actually tapping into both of those over these next 2 weeks. And that is actually reinforcing the energy that came together then. So what we're seeing is a real conglomeration of energies, whether they're coming from the sky or they're coming from within ourselves, that is leading us to look more deeply into who we are, why we're here, what is our purpose, and also what does it mean to be an evolved human being? And that is what's happening at this time. All these energies, I believe, are helping us to expand our consciousness, to understand why we're here, and to be the fully formed human being that we're meant to be on this earth now. Now, that might surprise some of you who are already waiting to leave this earth and go off into a 5th dimension where your soul lives, but that isn't our purpose. Our purpose is to make sure that this amazing environment in which we find ourselves, we call it our 3-dimensional world, that we experience all of ourselves in this place. It doesn't mean that we don't leave and come back, but this is such an extraordinary alchemical vessel that we want to make the most of it. So where we are going is to understand that there are at least 9 different densities or frequencies within this 3-dimensional world. Another way of saying it is there are at least 9 different cities within the country that we call the 3rd dimension. And that we want to explore all those cities before we leave and to make the most of being here. So I wanted just to share that with you because I think that what's happening to our Earth on a astronomical level is actually speeding up that process of us becoming more enlightened and connected to all that we are. Now, why do I say this? I don't know if you know, but we're sharing this planet with millions of different species. You might say, what? Yes, we're not the only ones. Of course, you could tell me about the plant kingdoms and the mineral kingdoms and the animal kingdoms, but there are also the viral kingdoms and the bacterial kingdoms. And then there are beings who actually we can't see or hear because we are living at a lower frequency, or our physical body can't pick up their tunes, their lights, but they're there. So why are millions of species all living on this planet at this time? Why not go somewhere else? What we're understanding is because of the unique conditions of this planet that they choose to be here. They choose because this is a rich, creative planet with a liquid core in its center, We know that this planet has this fiery liquid core, which brings new creation, allows new opportunities for growth. So before you want to leave here, just make sure you make the most of what's here. Okay, so what else happens here? As I say, I believe our future, and I will talk about this more in the future, is to communicate, to interact with many of the beings who, as at the present time, we unfortunately see as rather inferior to us, even the birds and the plants and the rocks. I want us all to understand that not only do we live on an intelligent planet, which is pure consciousness, Gaia, but that everything around us is intelligent and conscious. And we could learn an awful lot from what they understand and can see and can hear at levels that we haven't yet accessed through what I'm going to say, our psychic powers. But that's for another time. But the reason I wanted to bring that up is what I'm about to tell you is more of a disaster story. And you may well see it as such, but I want to put it in context that I don't think the planet is going to blow up or disappear. I think our planet is going through evolution as well, and she's already shifting densities and dimensions. So as long as we keep the shift going within ourselves, anything that might happen, one could say, on the surface of this earth is not going to affect us so deeply. Now let's get down to brass tacks. So you might have seen these auroras, you might have seen pictures of them, and everybody goes, "Woo, isn't this wonderful?" Well, it is if you only want to see them as beautiful lights that you can take a picture of. But if you want to understand why they happened, there's several reasons. First of all, the 7 solar storms that I spoke about were not excessive. The sun at the moment, although it's at its maximum, 11-year max, it isn't actually sending that strength of solar wind towards us. So even though we are getting these geomagnetic storms, it is not because of an excessive activity on the sun. What is happening is that our magnetic field that Christine keeps talking about is getting weaker and weaker. And it started back in the 1850s, the weakening started to be seen. And it was said that for 150 years, it only weakened by 10%. And then over the next decades, it weakened another 10%, but it again took a while. Now they're predicting the weakening is going to be every 5 years, we're going to have a 5% reduction. It's seen that we have lost perhaps 30% of the strength of the magnetic field. And it was predicted that it would take maybe another 20 years before we got to that 50% mark. But because of the acceleration that's occurring, some people are suggesting that by the mid-2030s, we will be at that 50% mark. And we will see extraordinary effects on our planet, on our health, on the other species that live with us. So what is going to happen? Well, one of the problems is that we see that ozone layer that we spoke so much about that could be affected by pollution is going to start to disappear, recognizing it has no longer any effect from our pollution, much more because of the cosmic, solar, galactic radiation entering into our planet. With that ozone layer disappearing, we're going to see problems both from our body, as you know that the increase in radiation reaching into our atmosphere gives us increased risks of cancers, but also increased risks of heart disease, arrhythmias, panic attacks, anxiety, autoimmune illnesses, anything that may affect that very vulnerable immune system. We're also going to see extreme weather effects. So sometimes it's going to be very hot, sometimes very cold, sometimes we'll see storms, sometimes we'll see hurricanes, sometimes we'll see massive lightning storms. So it's not going to be one thing because we are going to be very much affected by what's going on in the cosmos, rather than being protected by this magnetic field. We're also going to see, because the animals, especially the sea animals and the birds, rely on this magnetic field to know where to go, we're going to see problems for migration, for animals knowing where to find food, animals knowing when to hibernate. And this is going to affect us, because if the animals are confused and with, for instance, we rely on the bees for pollination, we're going to have real problems with our own food supply. Along with this, we have the radiation affecting the plankton deep in the oceans. Again, it's going to affect the food chain. On top of this, if it isn't enough, of course, our technology, which we are so reliant on, is also not going to be effective anymore. Our satellites that are going round and around the planet, which give us everything we want, communication, internet, banking, travel, keep our water supplies going. Imagine everything in this world no longer being able to rely on technology. This is going to affect us much more than we won't be able to just text each other. It's going to affect us very much down to the grassroots level. And so if this continues, and there's no reason to suggest it isn't going to continue, we have to understand, how are we going to survive, let alone with the storms and the weather changes, but just without technology. We won't be able to have fresh water supply. We may not get food supplies. We won't have lighting. We won't have electricity. We're going to be very dependent on ourselves. And this is why there are so many people looking at prepping, creating different supplies for themselves for these times. Now, why is this all happening? It's because the sun, and by association all the planets, back in the 1800s, started to travel through what is known as the galactic current sheet. What's that? Well, if you think of the galaxy being a spiral, and it has a north-south pole on the end of a rod, so north and south, but horizontally, this wave of energy, this wave of light energy, radiates out from the center of the galaxy, which is a supermassive black hole. And it's that wave-like energy called the galactic current sheet that our sun and ourselves are journeying through. And what we understand about this current sheet is that it is creating magnetic reversals to whatever it meets. So here it is, we have a magnetic reversal perhaps occurring not just to our Earth, but for the sun. And for other stars, we know that stars of the Orion's belt are going through magnetic reversals. And because of those magnetic reversals, they're seeing micronova, small changes or big changes in the stars that, of course, then impact any planets associated with them. And so what we're seeing in all the planets of the solar system is these huge shifts. Planets, for instance, like Pluto, are losing their atmosphere. Other ones are having a reversal of their magnetic fields. Others are going through different changes of temperature. And of course, we're also getting affected. And unfortunately, if I may say, the small minds of men are seeing this as a problem just linked to humans, because that's where it has to all come from. This is a problem that can't be solved by carbon credits or by shutting the door. It's a little bit like putting the finger in the dam and hoping you can hold back the water. You can't. All of this became intensified in 2012 when the sun actually was aligned to the galactic center while going through this current sheet. So we saw, from a holographic point of view, the breakdown of an old structure and the birth of a new one, and that is continuing. And I want to bring that in as something very positive, if I can be positive, because I want to say is this isn't just about something happening to us and that's it. We know these events have happened every 12,000 years. There's huge evidence from fossils, from stones, of seeing that these events have happened every 12,000 years. And what we see is people have survived, and not all areas of the world were affected. Now, that doesn't mean you should just keep your fingers crossed and pray you won't be affected, because our technology, of course, is worldwide. But what we do need to understand is, apart from, as I say, prepping for this experience through food, maybe food storage, etc., we also need to prepare ourselves to how do we change our frequency or change the way we live in order to not be living at the densest frequency of this planet Earth. What do I mean? We know that there are beings that live within the planet itself. They have learned how to create chlorophyll, how to create oxygen, and be able to live in the earth without sunlight. They are beings who live within the water in a similar way. They've learned how to do that. There are beings who have lived high on mountains in high altitudes. They've learned to do that. And I believe, and this is something that I've intimated already, is that there are beings of light, not necessarily star beings who are waiting to come to this planet to help us, but beings of light already here, star beings already here, who understand the technologies that are not necessarily connected to electromagnetic fields, but the inner technologies that will help us to move through these times. And that by doing that, we expand our own consciousness. We know ourselves more fully. And that's our purpose of being here on Earth. Our purpose of being on Earth is not just come here, lay down our piece of jigsaw and go. Our purpose on Earth is saying, I laid down my piece of jigsaw. How do I know myself more fully because I did this? I've described this before, but this isn't just about being here and leaving. This is about how do I open my mind and my heart to different levels of consciousness that already exist on this planet that I could learn to interact with, communicate with. And we can only do that when we move out of our arrogant thinking that we are the most superior race here and everything else is inferior. There are elementals, as I like to call them, when you might call them nature beings or fairies, who know how to come into this dimension and take on a physical form and then leave this dimension and back into a light being. It isn't the fact that we have to learn how to leave, but we do need to learn that we have to break free of the constraints of our minds that say, yes, I'm stuck here. This is the earth. It's all solid, because none of that is true. Where we may see that this wave of energy through which we're passing is a magnetic field or a field of photonic energy, at the same time, it's a field of information that we're passing through, a field of consciousness that we're passing through. And that consciousness is marinating us, immersing us in new levels of consciousness that up to now we haven't experienced, or that we only have memory of within our sleeping DNA. Everything is waking up. Our DNA is waking up. Our cells are waking up. Our eyes are waking up. Our ears, our hearts. Everything is taking on a new frequency. Once we move beyond this limited thinking that says, we are all that is. I can't wait to leave this planet. I came here to do something, then I can leave. I don't deserve light, whatever it is that we carry. There is no limit to where we can communicate, interact. And again, not necessarily off this planet with spirit beings or star beings. They're all here. Let's meet, let's communicate with the beings that are here now. And how do we do that? We do that through our psychic senses. And I say that's just by becoming more innocent, more curious. You don't have to go necessarily to a psychic class to learn this. Everybody's psychic. We've just shut that gift down. Once we open that gift up and we know we have it, and I can tell you everybody has, except for the small group that were perhaps shut down completely during things like the Spanish Inquisition. But research shows everybody's psychic, but we've just stopped using it. And by our ability to resonate psychically with the world around us, we start to open doors, open portals to different levels of consciousness that exist on different frequencies. This is not a time of fear. This is not a time of anxiety. You've lived through times like this before, and you're here now. Whether your physical form, your spacesuit lives through this one, I don't know. But definitely don't lose this information. Don't miss this opportunity to make the most of living on this beautiful planet in Gaia that is offering us a chance to know ourselves at levels that we could only have imagined in the past. Come alive, follow your dreams, follow your passion. Don't live in fear, don't go into a cave. Allow your heart and your mind and your body to understand that they've already experienced the richness of living as a being in the waters, or a being in the air, or a being in the earth. This is why we have these memories. You already know these things. And before you shuttle off to go and live in the earth, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying wakening up all your senses to be able to merge, shapeshift, move in these ways. So I see these as extraordinary times of reversal of magnetic field, but also the ability to know that we are and have the opportunity to reverse our thinking, to open our thinking, to change the way we've been looking, to let go of the need to always be following this line of time, past, present, future. Things are going to happen in the future, no doubt about it. We may well go through a reversal of a magnetic field. I don't know, don't remember it, but some part of me does. What happens is going to happen. What we do with the gifts that we're being offered at the moment is priceless. Stay informed, stay connected to this earth, open your heart and mind, and all of a sudden you'll realize that you're not an earth being or even a spiritual being having an earthly experience. You're a human being that is fully conscious of its universal ties and connections, having an extraordinary experience in this playground of creativity that we call Earth. Until next time, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the HeartSpeak podcast with Dr. Christine Page. Please check out all HeartSpeak episodes in the podcast archive section on www.christinepage.com. HeartSpeak is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Tumblr, and now playing on Amazon Music and iHeart Radio. You can also watch the archive podcast on Christine's channel on YouTube and now on Rumble. Connect with Christine on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook group, The Great Mother Calling. Do share with family, friends, colleagues. Join us next time for another edition of HeartSpeak.